Welcome to the Rock Solid Families Podcast. This is Merle Hutchinson alongside of my favorite and only co-pilot, Linda Hutchinson. Linda, how are you? Have you recouped from your travels?
Yes, but I'm working on it. It's hard to say goodbye. We traveled south. We had a chance to go visit our son and daughter-in-law and their family and their new home, and so we even got a chance to worship with our grandkiddos and see where they're going to be going to school and a new Christian school they'll be attending soon. So, yeah, it was great seeing them, but it's so hard to leave. Like, those hugs get harder and harder to let go.
Yeah, that's true. It's true, but...
I knew there was a but.
But it's also nice to get back in your own bed.
Yes.
Didn't you feel that last night?
Yes.
We hopped in our own bed, and it was just like, even though our accommodations and everything were great.
Yes. Yeah, we're great.
There was nothing wrong or anything. It was all great. But laying in your own bed last night, I was like,
Well, it was funny.
And that was just like relief.
We were sleeping in our granddaughter's bed, and she was teasing you because you were sleeping in a pink bed.
Yeah, come on.
Papa, you're sleeping in pink bed.
They thought that was funny.
But we're back at it, and we're continuing in our podcast series, Ask Us Anything. And so we've got a great question from one of our listeners about sharing the good news with a friend who doesn't really have any kind of faith or doesn't really seem to be interested in faith. And so, I want to read what they wrote.
Yeah, let's read the question.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into a few things about this because this is interesting because this is not very clear cut to me. So our last question, I was kind of like, this is a duh. Did you hear one of our comments? One of the comments that somebody said on Facebook said, "This is a stupid question," because that's what I said too.
Because you said that, right?
Yeah,
right. It
only
seems
because,
like a given.
Yeah, it was a given. Like, and the question was like, as you as a parent, do you have the right to look at your kid's phone? And again, I'm not trying to belittle the question, but again, it was just like,
it was a question from a 12-year-old.
Right. It was from a kid.
I felt like it was a really important one to really address again, because we do hear this so often, and it is a pushback we get from a lot of parents. Like, I don't have the right, or I don't want them to get mad. And so if you didn't have a chance to listen to last week's show, go back and listen to it, because I think it's really important, whether you're a parent or a grandparent, because sometimes we are in a weird role, and there's a lot of adults who are raising grandchildren or maybe babysitting grandchildren on a regular basis. And so it kind of puts them in a spot.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing you just brought up, hon. I would say that a lot of our grandparents, unless they're in their kids' or grandkids' life every day, don't really even know how much the saturation level has become of these younger kids, because they're just they didn't raise their kids in that, and they really wouldn't even know like how often these kids can be hours and hours and hours into the digital world.
Well, they kind of do know, and they don't know what to do about it, because
some of them
it's
do.
so foreign. And we also have some grandparents who are using it as a babysitter, because if they are doing regular babysitting, they're exhausted and they don't know how to entertain kids all day long.
If that's a position they're in,
So
that could
anyway.
be.
But that's not the question for today. What's the question for today?
So it says, I have a good friend who is not in tune with any type of faith. We've been friends for 10 years, and I want them to develop a relationship with God, Jesus. How should I approach this, and where should I begin?
Yeah. So it's a good question.
Yeah, we all have friends, family that maybe do not really claim a faith of any sort, or maybe blatantly do, right? Like maybe they're proclaiming that they're atheist and almost have a proudness to that. So, yeah, we'll get into that. How about before we do, because this is going to go a lot of different directions. I just know it. I know it. Let's thank our sponsors. Let's thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions, Maxwell Construction, and the Hoosier Ice House for being sponsors of the Rock Solid Families podcast. So thanks again for all their support. Also, thanks to all of you that are out there listening and sharing our shows. We greatly appreciate that. And as you come into a show that you think could be of value to you or someone else, share that or give us a review of some sort. We like to hear those things. Those things just help us get better and better at doing what we do.
Yeah, and we've been getting a lot of calls this past week. While we were gone, we heard that the phone was ringing off the hook about Families Rock. And the next one is July 27th, and that's our parenting class that we do monthly at the Lawrenceburg, Indiana Firehouse on Tate Street, Indiana, in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And it's really a class for parents, maybe they're co-parenting or blended family or divorce situations, or, it's really one that is important for any parent, regardless if you're together with your spouse or your other parent or not. So again, that's July 27th. It's from 8:30 to noon, and you can find more information about it on our website, rocksolidfamilies.org. Look for under services, Families Rock.
Yeah. Also, many of you that partner with us, we are having our summer celebration. It's basically a partnership celebration. It's really our way of saying thank you for your support that you've been giving us through the time that we've been around for 6 years now. And so that event is August 1st. So if you should have received an email. Hopefully you didn't delete that.
And an invitation in the mail.
And an invitation in the mail. Please RSVP that if you have an intention of coming to our outing that night. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Just can't wait to get out there and see everybody and have some good food and some good music.
So if you financially support us and you did not receive an email or something in the mail, please contact us. We want you to be there for the celebration. So, hon, let's get back to our question about sharing our faith with a friend. We don't have much background on this question, but it would be helpful if we did, because there's some variables here on this matter. And so there's a couple questions that we want really for you to ponder, because this isn't really just about the listener's question. We all have somebody that we need to share our faith with, or don't know how to approach, or they're indifferent about God. And so how do we approach it? And so here is some questions to think about before we really dig into the next step. And one of them is, as a Christian, us, are we modeling an authentic relationship with God or Jesus ourselves? The most powerful way to share our faith is living it in real time in relationship with our friends. So,
well, I think where you're going with this, hon, is the idea of, are we watching people's actions? Are they watching our actions? So in James 2, there's the whole passage there, 14 through 17. And let me just read it, because it talks about, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? And so, guys, the same thing here as us. If we're walking around and we're, wearing the Christian fish and we've got some bumper sticker on our car and we've got all these things, but we really don't reflect it in just our kindness, our gentleness, our respect of others, then we really have already lost the battle. Right? And so I think it's really important that before you even think about going into the conversation, you really ought to just get into the actions.
Yeah. And verse 17 in James chapter 2 says, in the same way, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead.
Right.
And so are people seeing our faith through our actions, our words, our attitude? And then the second thing is, have you prayed for them? Have you prayed and asked God for an open door to share your faith, to share your hope with your friend, asking God for wisdom, asking God for that sensitivity on how to approach it, when to approach it, what to say? We got to really invite the Holy Spirit into this process. Sometimes we think it's in our own power and our timing, and really it's more of God's timing and God's way.
Yeah, I mean, Scripture, Jesus came right out and told his apostles, he said, don't worry about what you are to say. I will give you the words. The Spirit will give you the words. And I can attest to that. And not that I'm the apostle of any sort, but I can attest, because I've shared that before. So many times we're in sessions with a family or with a couple or whatever, and you're just getting ready to just bang your head on the wall with, I don't know where this should go or whatever. And I really do. I reach out in a prayer, Lord, you have to help me right now. You've got to give me some direction. And it comes, and the words come. And so you have to first make sure that your heart is open to the Spirit speaking to you, because sometimes you in your boldness might be all about you. about how much I saved another person today. Look how many stars I have for all the people I brought into the church. And versus, well, is that really about them coming to Christ, or you getting another trophy with them as a trophy?
And that reminds me of your Strong Dads podcast with Carl on pride. Man, if you've not tuned into the Strong Dad podcast and the new guest host you have, Carl Andre, in the last session you guys had, your last series, your episode. I'm having a hard time with words today.
You're still sleeping.
The episode on pride. Wow, just so powerful. Is it all about you and your accomplishment, or are you just a vessel and allowing God to work? Because, Hannah, I'll never forget one Christmas I handed out or gave away Bibles to family members as a gift. And I just really prayed. And I think I even wrote a little note in there, just really asking the Holy Spirit just to pierce their hearts. And it was 5 years later that my brother called me, and he was on his way to a morning Bible study before work. And he said, hey, that Bible you gave me, which, it was a hard time remembering 5 years, but he said, I picked it up off the shelf and brought it with me. And so it's like, wow, 5 years later. And I just had to trust that I prayed for him and I prayed for the opportunity, and God is the one that gets the increase.
Yeah. Hun, there's something else that I think there's a vague phrase that was used here in this question. Said, are they not in tune with any faith? Well, I don't know what that really means.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a question here before you just boldly go out and start speaking all of this stuff about God and Jesus and everything, of really assessing where this person might be.
Yeah.
So many people, Hans, some come from virtually no understanding, no background. But many, many, many that we deal with come with a broken background, a hurt background where somebody did them wrong, or a church did them wrong, or even a priest or preacher did them wrong in their eyes. And so, I think it's important to really figure out what this in tune means, and where did it come sort of out of tune?
Yeah,
and so a little bit of probing, I think, goes a long way. Well, tell me, what did you grow up with, or what do you believe, or just randomly having some of that casual conversation really helps you learn to land in a better way with them.
Yeah, we do that on our intake form with folks walking our door every day. It's one of the questions we ask. And have you ever asked your friend, do you have any kind of faith background growing up? What has been your experience? Like you said, it could be a really bad taste in their mouth, which is why they're so against it, or they don't even want to bring it up. If they say they have no faith, is it because that they're unsure, like they're ignorant about it and no one's ever been willing to share? Because that's the sadness around us, is that it's literally people within our reach, within our circle of influence, that we really have never been bold enough to share, and they're just waiting. They're just kind of nothing because they don't know what else is out there. So, and maybe if there's hurt and pain underneath, and maybe you can get to that. Healing old wounds can bring back the desire to know and pursue God, or sometimes it can be the vice versa. Knowing or pursuing God can bring healing. Right. And often they go hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of in Proverbs 12:17, it talks about the idea of the words of reckless can pierce like swords. And I think sometimes us who maybe go to church, or we think we know a little bit, that and I have been guilty of this with family and with friends, where you flippantly say like, well, I guess they're going to hell, or, and I think the intention might not be harsh, but the way it's received by somebody else, like maybe I was just joking, but if they don't take it as a joke, it could come off as a wound. Yes. And that wasn't the intention. So you have to be really careful. And one way to do that is to put your toe in the water a little bit and find out what they're about.
Yeah, Proverbs 12:18 says, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise bring healing. So it's really about asking God for that wisdom and discernment as to what to speak, when to speak, if to speak. And so one of the most powerful questions, Hun, ever asked to me professionally was by one of our senior ministers that I was on staff with, Jeff Stone, and I'm just going to shout out to Jeff. He asked all of us around the conference table one day, and he asked us on a regular basis this: who are your top 10? Who are you praying for, and who are you in relationship with that need to know Jesus Christ? And hun, I remember very vividly where I was even sitting in that conference room. I didn't have a top 10 list. Everyone I knew, I was embarrassed to say that everyone I knew were believers. Like there was no one I had in my relationships that I was actively engaging with that was unbelievers. And I'm not saying you should always hang around with unbelievers, but I'm saying it's sad if there's no one that I am in relationship with that I'm actively evangelizing or, just sharing the faith with. So it could be your hairdresser. It could be your neighbor. It could be, parents on your son's ball team. It could be your server at your local family restaurant, And so I just got to give out a shout to Jeff Stone because he never forgot a name, and he never passed up an opportunity to either invite someone to church or to share his faith, to ask those questions about their background. And so that was just so convicting for me to really get out of the church walls and move into really the world of how can I love people to Christ.
This brings up a whole thought process in my mind that, prior to us coming into the Christian faith that we are now, which we would consider evangelical, non-denominational faith that we're in, we grew up Catholic, and we have lots of Catholic brothers and sisters now and all that too. But our Catholic faith was very private. We hung around our family and our friends, but you never went out and shared the faith.
Yeah.
And that's why evangelism was really weird, right? Like when we first started coming into it, it was very weird. Honestly, like we used to say, those people are Bible thumpers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so it was almost something that we grew up with, like, don't be like them. And it's been a hard conversion for me to go from the privacy of, well, everyone should just keep their faith to themselves, right? You never talk about politics or religion. And to say, no, like the Great Commission says, we are to go out. And so
make disciples.
And I'm not using that as an excuse, because I know it's one of these things that I've got to get bolder and bolder with. But I will say, like, there's a lot of people that carry their faith or lack of, right, really close to their chest. They play those cards tight. And it's hard because you feel like you're getting almost into their private room. That what are you doing in this room of my house?
But hun, you and I both grew up in very German Catholic communities where everybody in our neighborhood went to our church.
It was assumed
and
almost,
believed the same thing. And so there really wasn't anybody that challenged me or asked me, why do you believe what you believe?
Right.
And so I never really had to work out my faith with fear and trembling. It says that we're supposed to know why we believe what we believe.
Right.
And 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be ready to give a reason for the hope that you have. And so I wasn't prepared for that. And so the question for you and all of our listeners is this: do you have a friend who doesn't know the Lord? And is there someone in your circle of influence that you want to share your faith with, but you don't feel confident or comfortable enough to have that conversation? Or do you have a friend whom you have no idea where they stand on faith? It's not even, like you said, politics and religion.
Right.
You don't bring it up. You don't talk about it. But man, if you have a friend who's been a friend like this listener 10 years, and that's never been a conversation and a topic you've broached, why? Is it because of your fear? Is it because they're standoffish with it? Maybe they have made it very clear they don't want to talk about it. And so, I just wonder if the Holy Spirit is laying someone on your heart as you're listening to this show who doesn't know the Lord, and maybe it's for such a time as this.
Yeah, and that's good stuff, and that's a good challenge. I would say, hon, it's important that before you get into all of the sharing of faith, we talk about this all the time, even with parenting and everything else. Establish a relative friendship first, like a relative level of friendship. They don't have to be your best friend ever, but establish, because with friendship comes trust.
Yes.
And if the person thinks that they, hey, you've had their back, they've had your back, there's a little bit of give and take back and forth. So the idea first is that the friendship to you means something, and to them it means something. And it's kind of like you earn the right now to speak into their heart. And so, before you get all all eager about just going up there and saying, I want to spread the good news. You really want to go out further and build the relationship first so that they can go, hey, I'm attaching my cart to this horse that I believe in.
Yeah. We use the phrase a lot, rules without relationship equal rebellion.
Yeah.
So if you lay down the law of the Lord and say, this is what God says, and you're going to hell, right? Or, you're breaking his commandments, but you don't have any relationship with that person, then it's just going to cause rebellion and probably a loss of the friendship, because they're going to be like, you're just trying to convert me, or you're judging me. And so if we don't have that relationship first, and as you said earlier, if you don't know where they're coming from, if you have no idea of why they believe what they believe or don't believe, if there is some underlying hurt, man, you can trigger that. You might be stepping on a landmine if you don't know the story behind the story. So take the time and ask some open-ended questions and find out a little bit more. So help me understand, right? So we're going to give you some practical questions to ask here in a second.
Well, the first one I want to ask, though, Hun, is not necessarily an open-ended question. It's kind of a yes or no, but I'll say that I got this from the great Frank Henniger. Frank, once again, you're on our show. Where Frank just has a lead-in question and says, hey, where do you go to church? Right? And almost sometimes it's an assumption like, hey, where do you go to church? When they may, in fact, not even go to church.
I'm not a church-going kind of person.
But what it does is it'll either give you a bold, I don't go to church, or, but it'll open the door to allow that person to walk through it at the level they want to go through.
Yeah.
They might say, no, I don't go to church.
Yeah.
But that really helps you assess where they're at. So I think that's not really an open-ended question as much as it allows you to know where their foot is from the very get-go.
Yeah, and not just the verbal, what they say, but how they say it. Sometimes you can get a reaction, you're like, ooh, I just hit a nerve, right?
Yep.
Or they can kind of just give you this long explanation of how their grandma was Baptist and they used to go when they were little. And, so basically that means they don't really do anything now.
Well, we have one of our questions on our intake is, where do you go to church, or what is your faith background? Yeah. And so many of them say, don't want to go there, or keep this off the table, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, right off the bat, all right.
Okay, yeah. So here's the next steps. If you are ready to have that conversation, if you feel like that relationship is there and it's time for a conversation, here's just some really good go-tos that we've used to help kind of soften that experience. And the first one is to pick a time when just the two of you with little or no distractions. You don't want to do this when there's a lot of people around. You don't want to do this when the kids are bugging them or they're under stress, maybe in a high stressful work situation. You want to take them out to lunch, go get coffee. Maybe it's your walking partner in your neighborhood, something that, just kind of creates this space where
take them for
safe.
A long walk. A really long
maybe high mountains where
they're really 20 miles in today. We're going to have some talk. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. Now you want to talk?
Breaking you down.
Couldn't resist.
Anyway, pick a good time that is going to favor a good conversation. So that's the first thing.
Yeah, I think also some questions are hard for people. So you have to be careful, like to come straight up and say, what happens to you after you die? I would hold back on those kinds of questions. All right. But instead, as they're talking a little bit about their faith experience, just make sure that you're not preloaded with all of your responses. Sometimes I think when we get into this evangelism thing, we have our little script of things that we're going to run right through in our head so that we can somehow win the argument or win them to Christ. When in fact, we're really just needing to just hear them speak. Yeah. No, so when you were little, you said this happened, or somewhat paraphrasing, reparroting what they're saying, just so that they know that you're actually listening. Yeah. And, way too often we already have the words in our mouth before they finish their statement, which is a good sign that my heart's not in this for the right reasons. It's more about me trying to get my word across. And so just listen to them as to where they're at and bring back points of clarification by repeating what they've said in your your own words so that you can go, okay, yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying now.
Yeah. I think, though, before you even ask any questions, I want to not skip a step, and that is to start with the conversation by acknowledging how important their friendship is, how special they are.
Right.
In the last show with you and Carl, you guys both had this really awkward moment of just saying to each other how important you are in each other's lives.
That was strange.
But I think it's important because then whatever's spoken next is out of love, right? Yeah. It's out of respect for you. It's because I care about you. It's not like I'm there to judge or condemn you. And so I think that you got to start with that, as that kind of set the stage of where you see this relationship, and then ask them some open-ended questions like, hey, I've kind of noticed that we don't talk a whole lot about faith. And so I'm just really curious as to tell me a little bit more. Like, tell me what your experience has been, okay? And if it's nothing, then they're probably more of a blank slate for you to share your faith and to really the hope that you have. If there is something there, then you're going to get to the core of where this really is coming from, and that's probably a wound that hasn't healed right, or a betrayal that they haven't forgiven that person for, or maybe blaming God for. And so that really would help you to know kind of how to even direct the next questions.
Yeah. One thing, hon, especially when I'm thinking about this with people who maybe have had some rocky past with faith or church or what have you, pretty much most of us can say we can relate at some level, right? Whether you've been a cradle Christian or whatever it's been, we've all had bumps in the road, right? And so rather than coming off with, well, let me share my faith experience and how great it is and how perfect and everything, to actually say, you know, gosh, I understand what you're saying there. Like when I was younger, this was one of my struggles. And so that right away they feel like they're on equal ground with you and that there's an understanding. And then, you know, like, well, and then here's kind of here's how I had to approach it. You know, I don't know how necessarily you're going to approach it. I'm not going to give advice as much as like I got to this roadblock in my faith, and this is just where I had to come to, right? So kind of sharing your own struggle, I think, is helpful. We do that all the time in our own work. Like, well, you know, we were 32 years old, and this is where we were, you know? And so I think it allows people to understand that this is not about reaching a level of perfection, and you can't get into the club until you hit this perfect number, right? It's a matter of it's sharing an experience and then how you work through that.
Yeah, so what I hear you say, hon, is that you offer...
Wait, there you go. You're using that counseling thing back on me.
So what I hear you say is you offer this empathy and understanding and things like, you know, wow, I can't imagine how that would make you feel, or, you know, I'm so sorry that happened to you, or, you know, that had to be so hard for you. So basically you're offering them a validation that what they're experiencing is real and understandable and relatable. And so that really just does it kind of softens the next conversation because they feel heard, they feel understood, they feel validated.
Yeah. You know, the next point I think is understanding that there are going to be differences. Yeah. There are going to be differences in people's experiences, and then even ultimately where they are wanting to come to. You know, there are people that aren't going to just immediately jump on board. You know, you say, well, I'm sharing the good news. Why shouldn't they just want to buy all of it? But the idea is they don't necessarily buy that it's good news. In other words, there's a difference in their understanding. And so respect the level of difference that's there, and understanding the idea that we are all in a different place in our faith walk. And so for us to demand and expect that somebody is right where I am is really kind of ridiculous, and it's arrogant. So the idea of like, hey, I get where you are, whether, you know, we talk about infant Christians and we talk about mature Christians, just take them where they are. I also say to respect the different faith differences, right? If maybe you came from one particular faith background and maybe you're talking to somebody who has a different taste of a different, you know, this is not the time to admonish them for, oh, well, see, that's why we don't do that. Like, that's just not the time to do that, because right away the judgmental part over supersedes any good news you have.
Yeah, that is so true, hon. It shuts them down so fast when they feel like you're criticizing or condemning their beliefs or their opinion. And so you're just planting seeds, right? And honestly, I have had, and you and I have both had times where we have spoken to people and they kind of rejected it or walked away. And then years and years and years later, they come back and say, wow, what you said. And you're like, don't even remember what you said, but it was impactful for them. And so it's not a one and done. Okay. This is the journey. And remember, it's okay to disagree. Focus on the friendship and the understanding and not necessarily the conversion. And just, you can offer resources. If your friend is interested in learning more, offer to share a book or a website or invite them to church, if they seem receptive to it. And if they don't try to shove it down their throat. They'll come when they're ready. At least they know they're invited.
All right. So let's kind of start to close things down. The idea here is, you've got this friend. They are maybe coming into a journey of faith, or potentially. And so the idea here is recognizing that, as you used the phrase beforehand, this is about planting seeds. This is not about you're going to start your 20-mile walk, and at the end of the 20 miles, you're going to have a full-blown garden. It's about planting the seeds. It's a process. And so if you get that in your mind, that it's not a rush. God does everything in his time, right? And people's heart will be convicted on their time as well. So this is not about us being in control. So just think about planting the seeds and go from there.
Paul says it best in 1 Corinthians 3, 5, and 6. What, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord had assigned to each his task. I planted the seeds, this is Paul speaking, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. And so, I know you have experienced this too, we said before, hon, and so we may never see the fruit of the words that we share or the seeds that we planted, but we trust in God. And so your friend may not be ready to hear your message now. Be patient and trust, not your timing, but God's.
Yeah. I think maybe there's a little caveat here as we talk about reaching out to others. You also always have to protect yourself.
Yeah.
There are strong personalities out there.
Yes.
And there are days when you may be weak, whether you're just having a difficult time in your faith or your walk in your life. And so you want to be really just making sure that you're strong in who you are in your faith. And when you're out there and you're professing and trying to help plant seeds and bring people along, that you don't get sucked into something that maybe you shouldn't. So, you see this happening where people, they drift away in their own faith. And the next thing you know, like we've had people that shared their faith with us while we were young, and now they don't even attend a church or even proclaim really Christianity. And so, again, listen, we're all in our own place, but we always have to keep working on our own faith as well.
Yeah. So if your friendship ever requires you to compromise your morals and values, then it's not a friendship God wants you in. And so you may have to step back and love them and pray for them in a distance. Hon, I especially think about people who you want to be in relationship romantically or maybe business-wise.
Yep.
The Bible is very clear on this. 2 Corinthians 6, 1-4 says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what does fellowship can have with darkness? So remember, we worship the Savior of the world, and his name is Jesus. It's not you. And so if you're openly sharing your faith and your friend continuously rejects the good news and then is tempting you to go against your personal faith and beliefs, it may be time to dust your feet off and move on and pray for them at a distance.
All right. So, guys, hopefully some of this was helpful to you. Hopefully, you got little nuggets of it that made some sense. We all can share a similar experience or story where we have a friend who's not quite in the faith, but maybe they're asking some questions. Maybe there's a level of curiosity. And so hopefully the idea of you just starting with building that friendship and then start planting those seeds, that it makes some sense to you, okay?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we are called to do this. Sometimes those are tough conversations, though, right? But if it's too difficult, as chances are you're the one trying to drive it rather than the Holy Spirit. And so let the Spirit. Each of us comes with gifts.
Yeah.
Right. We all come with gifts, and some of us have the gift of evangelism. And man, I mean, those people just are amazing. We look up to those people with the idea, wow, that's pretty cool. That's a boldness. But maybe that's not necessarily your gift. It doesn't mean you don't evangelize, but maybe you do it more through your actions, through your service, through how you use your other gifts.
I think back on the Strong Deck episode with you and Carl. Carl shared something that he said he had struggled with for 30-something years, and he said it was probably the first time he's ever talked about it publicly. And I think about that. Have you ever been bold enough to share your faith journey with the Lord? Because I believe our own personal testimony is one of the most powerful tools that God uses to bring others to Christ. It can be so much more attractive and much less intimidating than opening up a Bible, as you said, and pounding someone over the head. So I think that's where so many people get stuck, where they don't know where to start. And so, just share your story. Share what God has done in your life. Tell them how big of a train wreck you were and what God has done there.
Work in progress.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. We want to close out our show. We want to thank you guys again for listening to Rock Solid Families Podcast. We want to thank our sponsors again, Maxwell Construction, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and the Hoosier Ice House. So once again, do us a favor, subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, right? Give us that 5-star rating. We greatly appreciate that. And hey, if there's anything that we can do to help you, whether it's a faith issue or whether it's a marital addiction, any kind of difficulty that you're having, please reach out to us. You can get us at 812-576-7625. You could always go to our website, rocksolidfamilies.org, and just check out what we've got going on with all of the different things in our newsletter and so on. So thanks a lot for continuing to listen and just be part of the Rock Solid family.
Yeah, a family. So yes, thank you so much for listening to the Rock Solid Families Podcast, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day.
Rock Solid Families wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. Casey's has grown to be one of the largest and most unique garden centers and gift shops in the Cincinnati tri-state area. Whether you are looking to take on that next landscape project or simply add a little home decor to your house, Casey's has you covered. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Call them today at 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home. Rock Solid Families wants to thank Maxwell Construction for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. For over 30 years, Maxwell Construction has been a leader in turning dreams into realities, building schools, banks, restaurants, and many other commercial and public facilities. Maxwell Construction has made it their priority to not just build buildings, but to build into their community. So if you have any construction needs, call them at 812-537-2200.
Rock Solid Families would like to thank Hoosier Ice House for being a proud sponsor of the Rock Solid Families podcast. In the heart of historic Lawrenceburg, Indiana, the Ice House is at the corner of Vine and High Streets. The historic building evokes a feeling of comfort with spacious indoor and outdoor dining, a large bar, and comfortable dining areas. Large enough to host parties, yet intimate enough to feel like your favorite neighborhood restaurant. So thank you again for the Hoosier Ice House for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast.